I'm Marcia Hiller. I'm core faculty in the Somatic Psychology program. Welcome, everybody. I want to just start by thanking our incredible student committee members who really have done all the work to make this happen. And it's awesome. It's just a great group. So we try and have these free presentations once a month, and we will be having another one on March 9th with Kelly Heekin and Woody Wu, who are presenting about their Kit Kat program that they do at San Quentin with incarcerated young men who are incarcerated for life but committed their crime as juveniles. So it's a pretty intense program. So they should have a pretty interesting presentation for us. And in April, we're having a Saturday presentation. I think it's on the 16th. It's going to be, we'll get more information out to everybody before then. But Barbara Ivins and a group of folks who've presented before, but not for a number of years, who are doing a program with incarcerated women and their children, working with that situation. But tonight we have Toonder, who we're having our reunion. Craig was my student at JFK. We figured out he graduated in 2003. So it's great to have him back as a professional, and he's a role model for our Somies. You will be professionals, and you can come back and present in our Somatic Speaker Series in a few years. How many of you, there are many people here who are not in the Somatic program.
We're anthropologists.
You're anthropologists. You're studying the body in present time. Great, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Any other folks from?
CIIS.
CIIS, okay.
ICP.
ICP, good. And we have people who just applied to our program. That's great. Good. So, I think I'm going to just let you do your own what your work has been in our class over 13 years. And about what you're going on tonight. So this will be a mix of talk and experiential work as we do here. Thanks for being here.
So, just to check, not everyone here is on the somatic track. How many people are on the somatic track? Of the people who are on that somatic track, or anyone else, who here is taking the Hakomi classes?
Not here, but
Or just the Hakomi in general? Okay. And then who here has already seen clients? So if at any point, if anything I start covering, it feels like I'm saying something that I'm assuming you know something about, feel free to interrupt me and ask me about it. So as far as my background goes, as Marcia said, I was at John F. Kennedy from 2000 to 2003 and graduated with the clinical psych program with the somatics program there. While I was at JFK, I studied formative therapy, which is Stanley Kellerman's therapy. After I graduated, I decided I wanted to get into therapy that had a bit more of a spiritual angle and was based more on principles of human relations. And so I started studying Hakomi for a number of years. After Hakomi, I decided I wanted to learn a bit more about trauma, so I studied somatic experiencing, which just really blends in well with how Hakomi approaches things. And then I started to crave working with the meat again, and so I started studying under Bill Bowen with psychophysical therapy. And I studied under him for a couple years, and I became his organizer. I've been his organizer for about 5 years. 3 years ago, I started teaching psychophysical therapy. And then this year, for those of you who know Bill, he actually had to retire for health reasons. And so for this year now, I'm actually the head instructor for the Psychophysical Therapy Institute. And if anyone wants to know more about our programs, I've got programs listed in the back as well as a sign-up sheet for our newsletters. So, as far as tonight goes then, one of the things that I want to do is make it as interactive as possible. So there's a couple stuff I'm just going to cover so we have the basic tenets and understanding of what it is that we're talking about. But then we want to get into the play. Right? And with this, I really want to encourage you to ask questions. I really want to encourage you to participate and join in, and we're going to use group mind. And the more interactive it can be, the better it's going to be and the richer it's going to be, because everyone can benefit from each other's ideas, especially since a big piece of the physicalizing work is working with the creative process. And so it is a process that the more expansive we can be, the better, and the more collaborative we can be, the better. And I'll cover more of that later as well. So, first of all, let me just define physicalizing. So the way we define physicalizing in psychophysical therapy is that it's the therapeutic process of giving physical form to a client's psychological and emotional manifestations, or an exaggeration of that physical form as they currently take place. Now with this, there's going to be a couple of tenets that this is all based on. And so for those of you who are in the somatic track or interested in the somatics, this is going to be a little bit of preaching to the choir, but the first tenet has to do with the mind-body connection. That anything that's happening psychologically in the body, emotionally in the body, cognitively in the body, there's going to be some form of a physical component to it. And with that, one of the things that you'll notice with physicalizing is that it's going to have similarities to any other experiential modality. Right? So drama therapy, a lot of Hakomi stuff, Gestalt type therapy experiments. In my opinion, though, what's going to separate a somatic psychotherapist from a more experiential psychotherapist, not that somatics isn't experiential, but what separates the somatic psychotherapist from the rest of the experiential psychotherapies is the therapist's skill and ability to work with and track the body components on a very anatomical level. And so if you're interested in somatic psychology, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to study your anatomy. The more you can know your anatomy, the more you know your anatomy, the more you can visualize it, the more you can see it and see how it helps take physical form, the more your interventions can be directed at the body and how the body is working on that mind-body connection level. Any questions about that? Okay. Let me go into some more specifics about some tenets, the implicit and explicit memory, and direct and interpretive experience. So some of you might already come across these concepts. I'm going to define them all just in case and just to make sure we're all on the same page. So it turns out that we actually have two types of memory systems. And the way I read that this was discovered is somebody came into the hospital with a railroad spike in their head, and they were one of those patients that couldn't translate long-term memory into short-term memory. And so you would meet this person, you would leave the room, you would come back 15 minutes later, and they had never seen you before in their life. Well, what they found is this person was actually starting to learn tasks. And then this became very confusing because if you can't translate short-term to long-term memory, you shouldn't be able to be learning anything new. Right? So you would walk up to this patient, and this didn't happen, I'm making this part up, but you would ask this person, have you ever knitted before? And they would say, no, you can't have knitting needles. And depending on whether you're Christian, Jewish, or whatever, they make you an ugly sweater that's appropriate for the holiday season. Just saying. So they started looking at this and they realized that there's two memory systems. There's the memory that we all think about when we're normally thinking about memory, which is the explicit memory system. And this memory system is cognitive, it's thought-based, and exists on a timeline. When I was 6, I got my first bike and it was red. Implicit memory is a procedural memory. It's the memory of experience. It's not really a cognitive memory. It's how things feel. It's how things are done. It's what things are like. Right? So my knowledge on how to ride a bike is my implicit memory. Now this comes in very handy in psychotherapy, especially in somatic psychotherapy. In one, explaining how people can get lost in projections and other stuff, or other activities that are similar to that. Right? That especially I work with couples a lot, or actually if I work relationally with an individual, this will show up as well, that a person will be experiencing me as the therapist or their partner in some adverse or scary or dangerous or unwelcoming or whatever the negative word is going to be way. And it's going to be in direct contrast to how I'm showing up for the individual. Right? So I'll be showing up with a lot of care and compassion, and you're going to be experiencing fear. And how this is explained is if something in your childhood, it's okay to single you out, if something in your childhood led to something relational with me paying attention to you was threatening for reasons of shame or abuse or whatever the case may be, then when I bring my attention to you and I'm trying to bring a loving presence, she may experience that as threatening, but she's experiencing that as threatening because she's in memory. But because implicit memory doesn't exist on a timeline, it's not going to feel like memory, it's going to feel real. And so this is something, whether you're working relationally with clients or you're working with couples and how they're relating to each other, that they'll fall into this trance and things are going to feel a certain way. And that's going to be incongruent with the current moment. This also becomes a very powerful tool for intervention, though, because implicit memory doesn't care about the timeline. And so when you're giving, for instance, in Nakomi, when they talk about missing experiences or the magical stranger intervention, or some intervention where you're going to give a client a new experience that's healing in some way, part of how they're understanding how that works is that you're laying a new implicit memory system down right next to the old implicit memory system. So in the explicit memory, I may know when I was 5, my father shamed me. And now as an adult, I'm having this experience with Adam where I'm feeling love. And then I can start to create well, there's all kinds of ways I can start to create healing around that. I mean, one of the very big, simple ones is if Adam's my therapist and I'm feeling a fear of being shamed, and he has me look at him and see the lovingness in his face. He's got a very loving face for those of you who can't see it. Then if he keeps me in my fear, and he keeps me in my fear in an embodied way, and then he has me look and see the love in his face, it creates a dissonance, it creates an incongruence. I'm feeling my memory of fear, I'm seeing lovingness. Now I'm not going to have to fix anything. Implicit memories don't get fixed. They get new experiences. And so based on the new experience of Adam, I'm going to slowly start to feel that love is actually available as opposed to shame or criticism. And I'm going to be changing from the inside. Right? Because as my therapist, there's nothing Adam can do to convince me that I'm not going to be shamed. I have to feel it in my body. And so getting people into this implicit experience and out of the explicit, out of the thinking about their problems, is important because when the wound is relational in nature, the wound, it's really, really difficult to heal a relational wound with explicit memory. We really want to get into an implicit experience to create new implicit memories next to the old painful implicit memories so that transformation can occur. But nothing gets fixed. I still have the old memory of being shamed, but now I have a new memory and I have a choice. Direct and interpretive experience is one that then Bill talks about a lot in his trainings with the psychophysical therapy. And I gave everyone an excerpt from one of the manuals that he made for one of the trainings that he does. And my apologies when I changed the formats and then mailed them off to CIIS, I didn't recognize that the format shifted the sentences around, and so the paragraphs are a little bit choppy. It still reads, but I do apologize for not catching that ahead of time. So the direct and interpretive experience are similar. They're not the same thing, but they're similar. That clients will often want to come in and they're going to want to talk to you about what they think about their problem. And they're going to want to tell you the same thing that they told everybody else, and they're just going to be retelling a story. And they're going to have this experience where they're just in their head giving you their interpretation, their story. And so one of the things in the psychologies that I do, the more experiential psychologies, somatic psychology included, is we want to get people out of their interpretive experience and into their direct experience. And in somatic psychotherapy, what we're looking at with direct experience is getting clients embodied and aware of or mindful of their present moment experience, but in an embodied way. Right? I constantly tell clients, I want you to feel it. Don't just think about it. Drop into your body and feel it. Because that's where the access routes I'm looking for are, and that's where the opportunities for transformation that I'm looking for are. Keep in mind that then with the idea in somatic psychology, there's this tenet that the body can only exist in the present moment. So by bringing somebody into body awareness, you get them into that present moment. Now granted, any of you who've studied quantum physics, you can argue with me about whether that's true or not. But as far as this lecture goes, we're going to stick with Newtonian physics. So we'll just go with me on that. Now, well, before I move to the next section, any questions about implicit memory or direct versus interpretive experience, and why we want to move people into the implicit, why we want to stay in direct experience versus interpretive experience? Yes?
This is not a question about why we want to, but in client work thus far, I can say that there are a number of people who are quite resistant to moving into direct or implicit experiences. And so that's, or have trauma that, or dissociative symptoms that are a lot harder to unpack than just say, feel what you're feeling, you know, or what you're talking about, you know. So that's just what comes to mind, and maybe we'll get more into that. Just maybe there's other techniques that support that before we can do this.
A couple answers to that. So number one, thank you, because part of why physicalizing is one of my favorite interventions is that it is a good way to move people out of their interpretive into their direct experience. There will be some resistance around that as well at times, but it is, for a lot of clients, getting them into play helps them drop into direct experience. The second piece is, let me get what I wrote down on this so I get it right. So this idea of getting clients out of their heads and directly into their embodied experience of things. The caveat to that is that you have to watch arousal level, because we would want to make it actually accurate, we would have to say to get them embodied into their direct experience without getting lost in the experience. So whenever we're looking at high arousal individuals, individuals with trauma, anything where the arousal system can spike and then they start to lose their ability to maintain and observe the ego, they're going to get lost in the direct experience. So when we're working with trauma, that's where they're talking about regulating and keeping them in the zone of tolerance. So I'm in the experience, but I'm not spiking out. The third piece is, I do have some clients that what they want from me is just to be able to come in and brainstorm and talk and get my opinions, and that's what they're asking for, and I'm going to give them that. I have actual clients that they come in and they go, I don't want to do any of that somatic stuff that you do, which in my mind, I'm not sure why they're coming to see me, but that's fine. If they don't want to do that, then I'll use more my Hakomi stuff that doesn't go deep into the somatics, or I'll use a lot of relational work, or whatever work's going to help them. So I do adjust how heavy I am in the experiential, how heavy I am in the somatic, based on client comfort. But I'm always also looking for, well, where's the wiggle room? How can I get them to go a little bit further than they're comfortable? So, but it is a great question. Now, any other questions before I move? So stages of the process. Physicalization can be used in any stage of the process. Psychophysical therapy is actually branched off of Hakomi, and so a lot of things are similar for those of you who've seen both. So these stages may seem similar, and they're not exclusive to Hakomi or psychophysical therapy, so you've seen them other places as well. But you can use physicalizing in the assessment phase, the deepening phase, the accessing core material phase, the transformation phase, the integration phase. With the assessment phase, what we're looking at here is I've got this hunch about something. I have a feeling that there's this theme that's probably going to play out here, but I want to test it. I don't want to just ask this person, hey, do you have problems with self-reliance and you feel like your needs aren't important? I'm actually going to want to create a test so that I can actually see in their body. Because oftentimes if something is out of a client's awareness, it won't be in their story. So when they tell you their story about themselves, there's going to miss stuff. But when you actually create physicalized experiments where the proof is actually in the pudding, you see it in the meat and the bones, it's going to show up. And then the client is going to begin to have awareness themselves and gain access to that too. That naturally slides into the deepening process. The more you can hold somebody into a mindfulness, a exploration, a curiosity of their present moment experience, the deeper their consciousness is going to go into whatever that is. And in a lot of modalities, we're looking at finding out what the core material is, the core wound. That can get shifted to whatever it is you're taking an angle on. So if I'm pursuing a attachment angle, I'm not looking for the standard Reichian core wounds, I'm looking for, okay, what are the attachment wounds here? Right? Or if I want to do it the opposite, I'm looking at differentiation. I might try to create a physicalized experiment that's going to explore, can these two people or can this person with me maintain a differentiated self state? So whatever therapeutic angle that you're aiming for, you just plug that into wherever that is in that equation about whatever the core is.
Will you talk a little more about what it means to have a differentiated self-state, whatever that, I didn't understand.
Okay. There's two things. The attachment theorists and the differentiation theorists like to go to war with each other. My opinion is ridiculous because it's two wings and a dove, that you have to both have individuation as well as bonding if you are a human. Because when we incarnate into this world, we have both. We have a desire to bond and form family and pair bonding and community. We've gotten to the point where we've got nationalism going. We're trying to get to globalism before we destroy the earth. It's not looking so good right now, but we're trying. While at the same time, when we incarnate into this world, it's our job to be the usness of this world. So it's my job to be the Craigness of this world. You can't be the Craigness. You have to be Bree? The Breeness of this world. That sounds better than Craigness. Right? And so both are true. Now what can happen though with the differentiation piece is people can't have, well, they have trouble, let me put it that way, let's keep it on the continuum. They have trouble separating your experience from my experience. Right? So for instance, a common one that shows up in couples therapy is if you're having an experience and that there's something that I did that was hurtful to you, if I can't stay differentiated and go, oh, that's your experience, and when I did X, that hurt you because of Y, if I take that and personalize it and go, wait, that makes me a bad person, then I'm going to get defensive and go, no, that's not true what you're saying. It happened this way instead. You shouldn't feel what you're feeling about me. But I'm insisting that you not feel the way you feel because I can't tolerate your feelings because it means something about me, as opposed to staying differentiated and go, oh, that's you. And then I can stay in my lovingness and my curiosity. Tell me more about why you think I'm a jerk. Dan Weil he's a couples therapist that does training in Oakland, collaborative couples therapy. He's got a great story where a couple comes in and he asks the couple, oh, so how did things go between you two this week? And the wife turns to the husband and says, there have been so many times this week, I just want to throw you in front of the city bus. Now that's what John Gottman calls a harsh opener. Right? It's a bad way to open up a conversation. So Dan's getting ready to catch the bullet because the fight's about to come. But this is the session that the guy got it. And so he just turns back to his wife and goes, oh, I must have really pissed you off. What did I do? And just stayed curious and loving. You want to kill me, why? Right? And didn't get defensive about it. Allowed her to have her experience and maintained his own sense of integrity in the process. Cute caveat is they come in the next week and Dan says how they go and the guy goes, oh, we were walking down the street a couple of days ago and the city bus was coming the other direction. I turned to my wife and I said, now's your chance. And ideally we want to get, when you have that kind of that differentiation, there is this feeling like, oh, I can be me and you can be you, and then we can work out how we're going to interact. But I don't have to be something that you need, and you don't have to be something that I need. I'm not going to merge with you, and you're not going to merge with me. Does that make more sense? Okay. All right. Yes?
I want to ask more about the merging process of the role involved, right? Like you're saying that both are applicable. And so when someone isn't focused on differentiation, there's merging that occurs, right? And so that has a whole field of...
Can occur, yeah.
Oh, can occur, right. It can occur. And there's a whole field of experience that occurs there, right?
You also referring to attachment?
Do you want to play?
Merging with attachment?
Well, the way I was hearing the differentiation was that, like, we can recognize our individual selves and hold that. In romantic relationships, there's a merger that occurs that maybe from an attachment perspective, we could draw back to, you know, past attachments and the conditioning that occurred there.
They blend.
They
When you
blend.
really look at them, they blend.
Uh-huh. I guess though what I was getting at was this other aspect of the other side of the coin of differentiation seems to me like merger, where you feel like one with someone else.
Yes. So when one consciously chooses to go into merger to create a oneness, especially if you're trying to create a oneness bliss state, for instance, if you want to get into really intimate, sensual, sexual acts, the merged state of I feel one with you in the act of sexuality is wanted and desirable in that moment. If you are upset with me and want to throw me in front of a city bus, I don't want to merge with you.
Right.
I want to stay separate so I can stay curious and actually show up for you.
Yeah.
And then the bonding, see, it's the reason why I say it's two wings of the dove is for me to actually bond with you, I have to be separate from you.
That's true too.
Without two eyes, there is no we. Feel like playing? Bring your chair up. Put that chair up with you, please. Okay. So, start by feeling into your body, but then feeling like your energy comes out of your eyes, and as you look at me, that you just flow out of yourself and into me. And can you feel how there's this kind of before, but we're not really you and I anymore. We're in this kind of merged phase. And as long as we're happy, it's really great. But if I were to start to get angry, it's not going to feel great anymore. Right? So now what I'd like you to do is let your hip roll down, and so that your weight drops into your pelvis. And feel your sit bones rest in the chair. And then from your sacrum, I take this from Qigong, and so I use the dragon's tail, but for those of you that don't like dragons, you can use tree roots, right? I like redwoods, but they don't have deep roots, so don't pick a redwood. So imagine either a root or a dragon's tail coming from your sacrum, so your sacrum drops a little bit. So you become a triped. You've got the roots through the sit bones, the root through the pelvis. This is appropriate as a therapist in session as well. Feeling the ground, letting yourself release your holding into the ground so that you create this triangular base of support through the pelvis, through the core. From this place, let your heart soften. But as your heart softens, be aware of your skin. And so feel that there's a you inside of your skin. Feel that you grounded in your pelvis. Feel that you that has an open, soft heart and an open, soft chest. And now when you look at me, stay inside your skin. And instead of coming out to join me, let my image come to you and receive me. But receive me as a separate you.
Separate me.
Stay in your skin. Stay loving, but notice the love is in you. And then I can be sad, I can be happy, I can be scared, I can be whatever's happening in my skin. And you can stay in your skin, loving, grounded, but present. Now ideally this is going to have a slower, let me know if I need to speak up, slower, deeper feel to the connection. So this is this idea of I'm going to take this concept of merger versus individuation, and individuation with being able to be present and loving, and I'm making it physical. It's not phenomenological anymore. It's in my pelvis, it's in my chest cavity, it's in my eyes. it's a cellular presence as opposed to a phenomenological, ideological presence, concept of presence.
Seems to me like it helps to be able to practice split attention so that I can be attentive to what is occurring as me, yes, and what's occurring as you, yes.
And you will find not all your clients can split attention.
Right, yeah.
And then you have to teach them, and it's slow. One of the ways, if you're actually going to work on this to develop split attention, when you lose yourself, close your eyes, feel your body. When you regain yourself, open your eyes and be with me. And if you lose yourself, close your eyes, find you. All right, put the oxygen mask on you first. Open your eyes and find me. And I can spend an entire 50-minute session with a client, having them close their eyes, open their eyes, and just being curious and tracking. How do you lose me? How do you lose yourself? What's happening here? So that's kind of, I just wanted to demo these concepts, again, using this idea of direct versus interpretive. But I can tell you that merger, we can have an intellectual conversation about it, or we can do it. Transformation. When we hit that level then of transformation, depending on the modality that you're working with, there's going to be some introduction of something new into the equation. In psychophysical therapy, we talk about introducing new resources. For those of you who've done the Hakomi stuff, they talk about you've got the missing experiences, the magical strangers, whatever the case may be. In relational work, it's going to be notice what it's like to be with me right now, and so the actual interaction between you and the client becomes the missing experience or the missing resource, or however you want to describe it. That can get physicalized as well. Integration, what we're really looking at for that is homework. Right? That whatever it is that got flushed out in session, if there is a physical activity, whether it's the physical activity that we did in session or one that we're going to make up at the end of session, how are you going to go home and with your muscle and bones actually practice what it is that we're working on? Let me give you an example of that. This is going to be really difficult for you, though. Does everyone, people who don't mind walking, if you could stand up. And I want you to go ahead and walk around the room. And as you walk around the room, I want you to take on this belief. I'm not safe here. I'm going to be judged. People are going to judge me. They always judge me. And as you take on this belief, feel what happens to your body. Does your heart kind of pull into a shell away from the world? Or does your chest puff up and I'm going to intimidate you before you intimidate me? Does the neck tighten and shrink and tuck in the chin? Or do you jut your chin out to try to have bravado? Notice how you walk. Is your walk one of the confidence? Do you feel like you're propelling yourself forward in the world? Or does your walk feel more gingerly, more tentative, more like you're pulling yourself softly through the world to not make waves? Or does your walk take on a stomping? I'm going to push through this world. Judge me or not, here I come. But feel what this walk feels like in your body. And then imagine the therapeutic goal that you have is, I want to feel like I'm more welcome in this world. That I'm free to pursue what I want and there's going to be support and love wherever I go. And notice that your body is incongruent with your wish. Now, in your chest, start to find a softening so that the chest can start to open and widen, and that it can relax, and that your weight can come down into your pelvis, through your legs, through the ground. And when you walk, if everyone could look at me just for a second, the leg muscles actually go all the way up to the top part of the lumbar spine. So imagine that your legs start from here, and that there's this length, there's this opening that can happen. So as you step forward, you fall and propel yourself forward into the world. There's a push-off with the back leg and the heel. Right? So the calf muscle gets involved. And there's an opening of the torso, opening of the chest. So that as you step forward, you propel yourself forward, and the chest comes open. And find your gesture for an open embrace of the world, so that the neck and the spine and the chest and the pelvis all open up, and you can push forward into the world. And find your gesture for the world embraces me. And so as an integration piece, one of the things that we may have you do over the course of the week, because most of the change happens between sessions, not in session, is to, for 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day, whatever it's going to be, to practice walking in this sense where there's this openness, there's this expansiveness. And I can practice an embodied experience of being open to the world. So keep that on or shake that off, however you wish. Find your way back to your seats. And just so you say, every client has their own nuances of what they need to work on. When I worked on how my gait reflects my psychology, for months, I would just, every time I would walk anywhere, I would practice walking from a new mindset. But that's just one example. Okay, speaking of mindsets, when you do this type of work with a client, one of the things that you're really going to want to do is hold a certain intention or a certain presence in yourself. I've mentioned these words before, I'm going to mention them again though. The two of the main ones start off with creativity and inspiration. On paper, physicalization is a super simple thing. You just physicalize whatever it is that they're doing. In practice, it requires inspiration. In one of those trainings, Stan Tacton said to us once, he said, I never want to do any intervention based on pressure. I want all my interventions to come from inspiration. And so when I'm working physicalization with a client and they're telling me whatever it is that they're dealing with on a psychological or emotional level, part of what I want to do is drop into my body, right, and feel into my heart and my gut. Do you guys know you actually have 3 nervous systems, by the way? So in grade school, you were taught you have the brain and the spinal cord with the spinal nerves, and that's the nervous system. So the heart is actually 64% neurons with its own nerves that talks to the brain. And the gut has the integral nervous system with its own nerves that also talks to the heart and the brain. And the 3 nervous systems all communicate. And I have this buddy, Paul. One of the things I love about him is every time I ask him his opinion about something, he goes, this is what I'm feeling about that. Right? And I love it because he never tells me what he thinks. He just, this is what I feel. And so I use this in my sessions. The clients are throwing whatever presenting information they're throwing at me, and I'll drop in and I'll feel and I'll go, what am I inspired to do? It's going to be a fun way to play this out. Right? So you want to use that. And you want to have a sense of play and curiosity, especially since physicalizing, if people feel shame. Like, a lot of people don't even like walking with me. Right? That's too embarrassing. So as a therapist, the more that you feel a sense of grounded playfulness and a grounded curiosity of like, oh, well, let's look at this. This is fascinating, right? And then things start coming up that the client thinks they should be embarrassed or ashamed about, and you're like, wow, that's really great. And they're like, aren't you going to judge me for this? And I'm like, no, this is great. And what the growth we can do with this is. Right? So we kind of just celebrate and just, what is this? Couples with that too, you'll notice that couples that really struggle in arguments, they can't stay curious about each other's experience. They just want to give their point made and win. And then, like I said in the beginning, the other piece is cooperation. When I start with a new client, in my informed consent, it's written in there, and when I verbally go over the important aspects of informed consent, I tell them all, I'm going to give you my opinions, I'm going to tell you what I'm seeing, I'm going to give you my ideas, I'm going to create these experiments. Your job is to refine everything I say, and everything I suggest, and make it true for you. Because until it's true for you, you're not going to get the clarity and the insight and the opportunity for transformation. So I'll set up experiments and I constantly pull, well, how do you want to modify that? How do you want to modify that? All right, that's the theoretical part of this. Any questions about that so far? Okay, so let's start playing then. We're just going to try to come up with different ways, and I can come up with some jazz standards that I have around all this, but different ways that we can start to physicalize presenting material. So for those of you who, well, if you're seeing clients, great, but if you're not seeing clients, do you have ideas? You have an idea?
I have a question, actually.
Okay.
So far it sounds like it's kind of therapist-led, the intervention. Is that accurate?
Okay. It's therapist initiated. The therapist gets the ball rolling. There's a balance that occurs then between the therapist, especially in the transformation phase. There's a balance that has to be managed on how much am I going to interject my wisdom, my theory of what health is, whatever the case may be, with your personal truth. So I'm going to lead, but constantly cue you to take over. And so, in the exercise that I just did with you, I just led that through for time management purposes. If we had more time, I would actually have flushed out more of your experience. Right? So for instance, the whole thing when I said with the dragon tail and the tree root, part of the why I do that now is I was telling everybody dragon's tails for a long time, and then someone said to me, I don't like dragons. And I said, great. Okay, so what's the image that works for you? And they said, I like trees. Right, so now I tell people, if you don't like dragons, use trees. So there is going to be a lead that, as the therapist, you do, and there is going to be an interjection of theory and wisdom that you bring. And constantly then give it back to the client. What do you want to do with them? Or what do you want to do with that? How do you want to modify that? How do you want to make it your own? How's it going to be your truth? So for instance, in the walking exercise, I said, you try to find this gesture that has to do with being open. Now I'm going to tell you biomechanically, this is how the chest and the hips work. But as far as the gesture goes, what's your gesture? If this isn't your gesture, what is? Is it this? Is it this? Right? And I want to find out how the exercise is going to be the most real for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right, so you're in charge of the process, but you give as much power to the client as you can so that they can be in charge of their truth. All right. So let me just throw a couple themes. Some themes that will often get physicalized are physicalizing no. A lot of people can't say no. That ties into boundaries. Boundaries do two things. They keep the outside out, but they also keep the inside in. We can physicalize both of those. If any of you have done chalk circle or yarn circles in nutrients, that's a physicalization of boundary. Moving towards and away, right? I'm sure you guys have done the approach, right? That's a physicalization exercise. Nice. Giving and receiving. I work a lot with giving and receiving. The idea I have props in my office, and I will do exercises. if I have an emotion, what do I do? Do I stuff my emotion? Do I hide my emotion? Can I expose my emotion? And can I share my emotion? And again, tracking the body, one of the things you'll see is I'll say to the client, oh, can you share your emotion? And they'll go, right? That's not sharing. Right? Or the other one is you're working with letting go. Right? Oh, here's this painful memory. Can you let it go? It's not letting go. It's throwing it away. Facing is what I use a lot because clients don't want to face things. I totally went out of camera, didn't I? And so I'll set things up. There was a client a couple months ago. She drew this monster critic, and we set it in the chair, and she sat across from it, and we just studied what it was like in her body to just face her inner critic. So I'm going to get some ideas from the audience. What's a theme that pops up in your practices or in your own life, or psychological theme?
Dissociation.
What?
Dissociation.
Okay. Pick the tricky one. I think we can do it. All right. We're going to use group mind here. How would one, and there's no right or wrong here, again, this is just inspiration. How would you physicalize disassociation?
Has a very fast and sped up quality. In addition to a split quality, it's a very fast moving quality. Like what I just did, actually.
So that's going to be using gesture and movement to feel the speediness of the dissociation. So I'll have the client do this and just study what this is like. Now if I study what this is like for me, what I notice in this fastness, I also lose ground. So now I know, oh, I have a missing resource here. Somehow I need to find my ground again. You got people take on this gesture of the speedy kind of dissociative thing, and just track your experience. And I do this mentally in my head with clients. Like if I could imitate, if I could step into their shoes, what does it feel like? And what experiment could I do that might flesh out what it feels like to them? So what are people noticing? What might you create a hypothesis around something to explore with the client?
There's a lot, I feel like there's a lot coming in at me with this gesture. And it's sort of inundated with this gesture. So to explore, if I would report that as a client, or what's like the pathology around that.
Could you see his gesture? Yeah. So now we're looking at, if we combine what you're brought and what I brought. So up and flooded with stimulus, how do I come down and form boundary? And then anything can happen. I could come down and form boundary and then feel guilty because I'm betraying my parents. Right. That's that curiosity piece. When you do it, what happens? That's why it's an experiment. You never know where it's going to go. And so even when we were talking about leading it, there's a way that the process, you're both leading and following process at the same time. All right.
This feels really connected to my experience with dance therapy.
Yes.
Does it feel like there's a lineage to this from that realm for you, or
To what, Marsha?
dance therapy? I mean, just the creativity and embodiment and experimenting.
Yeah, that's when I was talking about the anatomy piece. So I would include dance therapy as an experiential process that we're getting out of interpretive experience and into the dance, into the direct experience. And when I took dance therapy from you, the focus for me at that time in my one class had a lot to do with the desire for organic flow of my movement. With the somatic work, where I would start to differentiate it, is I'm starting to look more at what muscle groups are involved in that process. And so the focus on the kind of micro movements and way things are initiated, and there all kinds of categories start to fall in that maybe in more advanced dance therapies they're looking at, but I just had the intro. But any of the movement stuff I do ties into the dance stuff. You guys want an easy one? Anybody ever have a client, or anybody ever feel like, oh, I can't decide if I should pick A or B? How would you physicalize a dilemma of having to choose between two things? Ooh, the pull, yeah. All right, so if I was working with Marcia, I might walk up and pull her on one way and then run behind and pull her on and help play with that pull. Or I may have her pull me if I want to have her study what it's like to be the puller versus the pulley. Like we can flip the table on herself. Anyone else? Ideas? Yes?
We could give each some type of gesture or movement and see how each feels.
Just study what it's like to be inside that gesture movement. Yeah.
I kind of find myself doing this, kind of like looking at 1 and 2, left and right.
Do I have pizza or tacos? Tacos. Or I could do that. Well, what does my head say? What does my heart say? What does my gut say? But again, the difference is, while you're running that borderline on that one, am I aware of my interpretive experience? Am I aware of my heartfelt sense of things? Am I aware of what my gut tells me? Here's one. I love my jumper. Start to get scared. My head starts to get a little swimmy and confused. Heart tightens up. I feel uncertain. Well, I didn't decide what my 2 tracks were. Now I don't know anything. What would that be? Okay.
Tacos or pizza?
I feel excited about the opportunity, but scared about it as well. I feel disappointed that I let an opportunity pass me by. Now, any of those experiences that I felt as I walked that road, we could flesh out in more detail and explore. But again, as long as I'm standing on the road, you can go back into your body. What do you actually feel? That's another dilemma or a theme that clients bumped into.
With fear of rejection.
All right. How would you physicalize fear of rejection?
You have them walk up to you and then turn around, walk back. That would be pretty real. They could walk up to an object too, again, do that charge.
Yeah, you can have them, if you do kind of like a Gestalt empty chair, imagine whoever it is that you're worried is going to reject you in that chair. With the fear of rejection, what's wanted instead?
Acceptance.
Yes. Do you mind if I challenge you on that, though? If you have a fear of rejection, in order to not feel a fear of rejection, it requires being accepted. Now, you're not free. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Have the power to accept or reject? Have your decision?
Now here's where we need to flush things out. Could you give us a few sentences to flush out the fear of rejection piece, how it plays out, whatever it is that you're imagining?
Let me think about. Just, be fearful to, make a decision or, start a new relationship. Take steps that where the rejection might occur in different aspects of their life.
So with starting a new relationship, it requires risk. And so fear of rejection might be countered by being able to tolerate risk without going into a self-hatred story, as opposed to being accepted by the other. Now, again, if the client has a history of being rejected, and then they're throwing a transference on you, or they're experiencing you as rejected, then working with the acceptance piece can be really good, right? Because what you said isn't wrong, it's just you want to think about the context. Because keep in mind that, especially the younger we are, our desires, the wish itself, right? The desire itself, the passion itself, right? Whatever it is, the need and the want itself, is directly connected to the experience that's met with. So if I have a desire for acceptance, I want to feel like I belong, right? So a belonging and acceptance, right? And I continuously, in my childhood, feel rejected and shamed and cast away. In my psyche, the desire to belong will be linked with rejection, and my own internal desire will become a threat. And so that way, when Adam sits in front of me with his loving eyes, I'm going to get scared. Because if I trust him, that just means I'm going to get burned. And so in that case, we would want to work with, can I receive acceptance? In the case of the new relationship, it may be, can I risk not being chosen without falling into some self-critical, self-judgmental pit of rejection. And so with each of those, we would physicalize it differently. And so if I were to do, if Adam were to be working with me, can you come into the camera?
Is that right there?
Yeah, bring it your please. So what I'd like you to do as the therapist, if you will, is to have this ball be your acceptance. And to just extend it and say, I accept you. And then ask me to study what I notice. Ask me what I like about it, what I don't like about it, what's appealing, what's threatening, what feels possible, what feels impossible. And you want to give that menu of the whole gestalt of experiences so that I'm clear as the client that I don't have to accept to please him, that there's not a right way to do it to be able to take his acceptance, that he's more interested in who I am than what I can do. Because again, it's not about fixing anything, it's about being curious. So if you could do that for me.
Okay, I'm going to try here.
And I'm going to try to get to a rejection.
So I'm going to present this ball. And as I do, I want you to notice what you feel toward me extending this to you around you accepting. So what's possible here? What's not possible?
All right. Any body trackers out there? Can anybody see that I'm triggered? What do you see?
You're very still. You're sitting down.
You're not breathing.
So not breathing, very stiff. Somebody said something about back.
Sitting, you seem to be sitting back, like almost leaning away.
All right.
You seem to be pushing through your legs away a little.
Your hands
Like
are kind
into
of
the back.
protecting yourself.
Yes.
Your face looks straight.
Your jaw's set.
So now you're doing somatic work. I don't even have to say anything. Right? Just by Adam going like this, if he's tracking me somatically, the whole story is now starting to unfold. Right? And he and I can talk about whether, and I might try to, oh, you know, acceptance is good, I trust you. Right? But you can tell that my interpretive story does not match my body language. Right? So his job is to drop me in my body and get me to feel how I stiffen and pull away and get scared. And my arms are dead too. All right, now if he were to challenge me and ask me to take the acceptance, can I take it to my heart? All right, I might do something like this. Now again, track what I do and notice if your bullshit meter goes off. What did I do in order to take it to my heart?
Overrode your experience.
Right. Because you guys see that.
Yeah.
So as a therapist, you're going to slow it down. And I want you, I'm going to use my left arm so you guys can watch it better. I want you to ask me to very, very slowly reach out for the ball, and as soon as I notice something funny in my body, to stop.
As soon as you notice
Yeah.
something funny.
And if I don't catch it and you do, you can go, wait, what was that?
So I want you to reach out for this ball very slowly. And as soon as you notice something funny, let me know. Stop there. Right now, before you're reaching, there's something you're doing.
I feel like I can't lift my arms. Like I had a surgery recently where they shot me up with some numbing agent, nerve block. And they wanted to make sure it worked. They said, lift your arm. And I couldn't. I mean, I can. But it just feels like they're dead.
Where does that deadness start? Your shoulder, just in your arm.
A little bit in here. It's a lot in here. It feels like this doesn't even exist. This is a client with good body awareness. And it feels like there's this pressure pushing down on my heart.
Sure.
See right there, it even feels pain.
So stop right there. Stop right there. What's painful now? Where's the pain?
It's weird because it's not a real pain, but in my mind, the words, "You're going to regret this," I'm going to regret this, start coming out. Remember I was talking about celebrating stuff that should be shameful? That's something you want to celebrate, right? And get like a little bit excited, like, oh, great catch. Great, let's look at that. There's something there, right? Because that enthusiasm is going to create a sense of both acceptance and it's going to prime me to stay with my experience. Because eventually I'm going to want to try to jump into my head to escape the stress. I mean, one of the things about when you're working with physicalizing, and this is really important, especially as new therapists, is really getting that a big part of the job is not to make your clients feel better, right? It's to create the right amount of stress for your clients to explore themselves. Bill and I started talking about it in terms of using Dante's Inferno, that I think it was the Archangel Michael. Michael? Great. Michael's job was not to rescue Dante. Michael's job was to be Dante's guide, to lead him down into the depths of the Inferno so that Dante could then have his own ascension. Right? So the suffering that you're making me feel is bringing out my implicit memory because he isn't doing anything threatening. There's nothing threatening happening. So my experience of threat has to be memory. But because it's implicit, I feel it now. And so now we can explore it and learn to work with it in a new way. And slowly, through the course of a 50-minute session, we may get to the point that I take this and I bring it to my heart. Oh, and then my heart hurts. So now I feel my grief. And so now we would do grief work. But it could be slow. It could happen in one session. It could happen in multiple sessions. I once had a client that I had to sit like this. And then I would be like that. Oh, too much. And it took 3 months before we could do this. But this client had strong wounds around belonging and acceptance. And I'm kind of an intense person, and so when I would sit here with the intensity of brightness, it was freaky. And now it's not. Yes?
How did you know? Was it just from reading their body language to turn to the side to make them more comfortable?
Sometimes I figure things out by gathering information and just asking clarifying questions until it dawns on us what needs to happen. Sometimes they're just standard themes. This isn't the first person that I've had to turn away from because whatever it's called when you're front to front like this, it was too intense. You'll see a lot in various modalities that they'll come in and like, well, how close? Like this, like this. So I already knew proximity was part of it, and so just in my mind, just because I know proximity and turning towards and turning away have similarities. But what's tricky is that oftentimes I just get a hunch. And at this point in my career, when a hunch won't let go, I follow it. All right, so if I'm sitting and we're exploring and you're uncomfortable and you're uncomfortable, and in the back of my head something keeps saying, try to turn away and see if what happens. Right? And after 2 minutes, it just won't let go. I create an experiment. I go, let's try something. And I often ask, what's it like with me sitting like this? It's fine. And I go, okay, well, when I do this, better, worse, the same. So part of it is just, that's why I said that the idea of inspiration versus pressure. There's a way that I've just learned to trust my intuition. And what's tricky about intuition is sometimes it feels like I have no idea where it's coming from. And sometimes it feels as if, oh, well, you know, of all the experiences that I've ever had, that's all in my subconscious. And if I think about it, I can start tracing it back. But it's a non-cognitive process at times, too. And that's the hard part about physicalizing, is it's improv. You just make it up. We've got 10 minutes. Do you want to go into Q&A? Does it feel like doing another example would be beneficial?
I mean, I have a question, a specific client question. So, say in a couple, one person really wants to fight with their partner, but that equals closeness, and the other one gets really stressed out by fighting and sees closeness as not fighting. How to physicalize that?
Okay. Any ideas from the group mind? Do you mind coming up with me, by the way?
Can you just review again the two?
So there is a couple coming in. They're stressed. One partner is comfortable with conflict and finds conflict as a way to connect. The other partner is conflict avoidant and pulls away from conflict, which most likely then sets up a pursuer-distancer cycle where one person keeps initiating conflictual conversation to try to draw the other person out, causing partner B to withdraw out of fear of conflict, creating more loneliness and unavailability, and a feeling of one's partner being unavailable in partner A, leading to either more conflict or I just have to shut up and give up and just be alone.
Yeah, she's not even enough.
Great, she keeps pushing.
However, the partner B goes into the merger thing of like, he's starting to be able to talk about things he doesn't like. There's some steps happening, but he'll go into a merger thing of, oh, this is gonna make her upset. So I gotta go back, like as he's trying to come
Okay. Lots of inroads. You're actually, like, your question is probably 3 months of interventions, to tell you the truth. But what kind of starting grounds do folks see in this description that they could use physicalizing?
I wonder if getting them to even toss something back and forth between them would, it might not physicalize so much that experience, but might shift the experience to one that's more equal. You know, rather than like one person throwing all the time and the other one receiving. I mean, you could do that. You could have 50 tennis balls and be like, okay, bam, bam, bam. And that would be actually a great way of physicalizing. You catch this. And then the other person is experiencing what it feels like to throw 50 tennis balls. And they can see like, damn, I see I just do 50 tennis balls.
Are you okay with balls being thrown at you? Honestly, I'm not.
Totally, yeah, I mean, I like juggling.
Like right now?
Yes, totally.
Okay. So, all right, I'm going to rush through this. One of the things that when you're working with couples is couples have to be able to recognize the system that they're in. Right? We've all studied system theory. Right? And so step one is awareness of the system. If you don't know what your system is, and you don't know what you need to put the brakes on, and you don't even know what you need to change. So we're in this phase here, trying to build awareness through accessing and deepening. All right? So here are all the things that you're upset with him with. Right? And how does he go into a coping strategy around things being thrown? What does he do?
Client B.
Yeah.
Distance.
He's not gonna like me.
What does he do? Is it he or is that he?
Like
Okay.
I imagine it would be.
Does he also block her out? Does he placate? Does he dismiss? He placates?
So he takes over.
Minimizes.
Okay. Come up. Have you ever minimized anything?
Yes.
Great. What gesture would represent minimizing?
Well, in this instance, I picture a ball coming to me and just kind of slapping it out of the way, where I pretend that I don't even notice this.
Does this body language work too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So feel the pull back, feel the crossover, and just kind of okay. And then just start throwing balls at him.
I think it'd be quite aggressive.
Try it.
Like that.
Maybe not quite that aggressive.
Energy in the room.
So in the interest of not hurting each other, so just let yourself, don't let go of the ball, but just let yourself do the throw gesture, and when she throw gestures, just go like that.
If you throw it here too, that's going to be less intimidating for me, because then I can just, yeah.
So long term, so I'm going to then flush all this out. What's this like? Notice how it's not working. Notice how it's a cycle. Notice how you affect each other. Right? So all that kind of system theory stuff. I'm going to flush this out. Now, eventually, so he's needing to learn to come forward. And well, take your seat. Yeah. Go like this one. So one thing that I might want to then play with, I'm assuming he's not expressing his emotionality around this. He's hurt around what she does. He's starting to. Great.
A little bit.
So I'm here and she's there. Eventually, the distancer is going to have to learn to re-engage and draw a boundary. So the distancer is going to have to go from something like this to this. And if she has anger resistant or avoidant attachment style, I would add this. And then what she's going to need to do is what?
Yeah, still off right?
One possibility, so again, I'm just riffing, right, is that this is the anger. This is the hurt and fear. So get ready to throw the anger. So people with anger resistant avoidant attachment styles, often take the pursuer role. They pick up the sword and they want to fight for love. But they don't want to expose their underbelly and tell you how scared they are and how lonely and abandoned they feel. So she has to bring down the sword and extend her fear. And then eventually, from here, once she drops her sword, then I can come here. What do you notice about her shoulder?
Drop it down.
The hand's job, the hand is where we make contact with the world. When we talk about our core, when we talk about like, oh, where are I? I'm here, right? There's this lovingness of the heart, right? The heart chakra stuff, right? Everything you see in spirituality about the heart. The arm's job biomechanically is to place the hand in the world. We're told in grade school that the arm goes from here to here. If you study the anatomy, the skeletal system, the arm starts right here, where the clavicle meets the sternum. And when you study the muscular system, the muscles of pec and pec minor, of latissimus dorsi, of all the rotator cuffs, all of it, the muscles of the arm start all the way around the chest and then down part of the back, and then up the neck. If I tighten here, or here, or here, I break the connection between my hand and my heart. And so you're going to want to track this in the couples if you choose to do this. That it's not enough to simply do this. Right? Okay, let's say I'm just holding a ton of resentment, and the therapist says to go to help her hold her fear. Right? I can cut off the, right, but it's dead. I have to actually soften and let my heart feel the weight. Anybody catch what just happened? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who is she to trust me? I'm never there for her. Why would she let her wait and let me actually help hold her? She also did something funny with her fingers where they got loose, and I couldn't quite tell if she was wanting to give me the ball or she was wanting to really own the ball, or I don't know. Right? But I'm going to get curious about this, because this is not this. This is mutuality. Like, I have my deeper pain, you have your deeper pain or fear or hurt or whatever it is going to be. And I'm going to be with you with yours, and you're going to be with me with mine. But your pain is your pain. Right? So we're still bonded, we're still connected, we still have attachment, but we're still differentiated. Hers is hers, mine is mine. Right? Getting here is tricky. And there's going to be all kinds of defense mechanisms that want to avoid going here because it's more vulnerable, it's new, and there's a history in couples that come to see you of unavailability, lack of receptivity, lack of compassion, lack of understanding, lack of curiosity, and therefore lack of trust. Now, I may need some extra support. I may need to really be able to hold my boundary for myself. That just because she wants to throw me in front of a city bus doesn't make me a bad person. And so I may have to add stuff and put it in a circle around you. And so that's you and this is me. And I can sit here and look at like, okay, here's me in my circle and I'm feeling this way. And I also love you, and you're in your circle and you're mad, but you're also feeling fear and you actually love me. How are we going to get to mutuality? But I like this exercise with couples because it physicalizes the mutuality and you get to see where the unconscious blocks are, as opposed to talking about it as a concept and then having them come back the next week and go, well, how did it go? Right? It's simple. Why don't you just do it? Because it's on paper, it's super simple. In practice, lots of stuff gets in the way. That's the best I can do with your question. Okay. So, wait, do I go to 8:30 or 8?
You can do 8:30. That's what we were assuming.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday to me. I thought I was like, I'm like, dang, we're running out of time. Okay. Let's go with more examples then, unless any other questions, or should we go with another example? Yes.
Would you ever want them to switch those postures so that they get to experience what the other person's posture is feeling like?
Yes. One of my I have a client that this particular one worked great for them, and they mentioned it multiple times through the course of the treatment that I had. So it was a heterosexual couple, married for several years. They had a kid. And the guy was, he was a substantial guy. He was over 6 foot, and he just had a big, real, like, strong voice. And, you know, kind of powerful businessman, and he just had a lot of bigness to him. And she, what was the, oh, let me get my thoughts. She's more social than he was. So he was a little more introverted. She was more extroverted. They would go to parties. She would just be alive. And he would hit a saturation point. And then he would want to leave. And then she would take half an hour saying goodbye. And then he would get really mad. And then him being mad was very scary. And he was a big guy. And so when we flushed out what the experiment was like in the physicalization, what we ended up doing is when he went into his felt sense experience, do you mind coming up? All right, so they would, so what he ended up, you played statue, and she gave permission for him to direct her body. So if you could go like this for me. So he went like this. Right? And this is this big 6 foot guy that's cowering, and she was like 5'6" or something, I don't know. Right? And then I had him switch. And I had her feel him cowering. And for her, it was this, thank you. For her, it was this revelationary moment that she had no idea that her big, strong husband felt small and uncared for. But when she saw him and then she sat in his shoes, it clicked with her. And for the first time, his sense of powerlessness made sense to her. Right? But it, again, she witnessed it, dance turns, and then I had her feel it, so that it was in her body that this was his experience. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting. That makes more sense to me than a little bit of what you did before, because it seemed like she was required to shift her energy and emotional tone more than you were, so that she actually had to do more to cover the distance to arrive in the relationship than you did. I'm not saying that you didn't have to do anything, but that her having to drop her anger. It seemed like the role reversal. I don't know. It seemed to me resonated a little bit more with just being able to understand what the other person was experiencing, without necessarily having to require one person to do more work than the other. Just that was my response to the first part.
Yeah, and part of that is because I thought we ended at 8 for some reason. I was rushing through that one and skipped a bunch of stuff. Just jumped all the way to the end. There is a way, so in that dynamic of a pursuer-distancer dynamic, each person has a job. The withdrawer needs to learn to re-engage, and in a way needs to learn how to stick one's head in the lion's mouth. Because when someone's attacking you, the last thing that you want to do is come closer. And when you get that that person's attack is stemming from abandonment fears, and that by moving closer, that their system will calm. Not for, like, I always test this. I don't. More often, it's one of those things that you can bet the house on, but you still have to test it. if you're clear that you have someone who's anger resistant, physical proximity and touch. If the withdrawer moves in and touches the pursuer's body, oftentimes the pursuer's system will start to soothe. And it's an initial step, but ultimately, right, so the job of the withdrawer is how to engage, but the job of the pursuer is how to soften into vulnerability. Because the withdrawer is going to hide their vulnerability behind a wall of some sort, behind a pushback, or a counterattack, or a cutoff, or a dismissal. I'm going to take how I really feel, and I'm not going to share that because you're not going to accept it anyway, and I'm going to block you out, or I'm going to placate you. I'm going to cut off my heart and just give you my wooden hand. The pursuer is caught in the trap that the anger of the attack is safer and feels powerful, and they feel scared and powerless, and that they have to learn to put down the sword and show up with the vulnerability, which can be particularly dangerous because the anxious, ambivalent, anger resistant type often fears that their vulnerability will expose a deep secret that they're too needy and too much. So it's scary to be vulnerable on another level for them. Now the couple as a team, and this is the tricky part about couples therapy, is recognizing that there's three things that are happening. You have to do your own work, the partner has to do his, her, or their own work, and the couple has to learn to do the work together. And then it's a supportive process. Because what you'll often find is I'll point to one person's, oh, well, this is your end of the work that you need to do. And the partner will go, yes, whenever I'm mad, you need to show up and just tolerate my madness and understand that I'm afraid. And it's like, yes, and you need to recognize that when you lead with your anger, you scare your partner and that you're hiding your vulnerability, and you need to do that work. And you can't just put it on your partner to carry that burden. So it's a tricky thing that couples often struggle with that concept that all three goals have to be worked on. Any comments or questions about that?
No.
Feel helpful
Thank
though?
you.
Or?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm curious about when you reached out with the arm that was feeling dead. What if you have a client reach out with the other arm that's feeling more alive and is more likely to feel successful?
Huh. I haven't run into that. That's interesting. Any context around how that might be occurring?
What do you mean?
That one arm would feel more agency than the other.
Well, the client described the other arm feeling dead, right? So I'm assuming the other arm is more alive, and I think they feel more successful taking the ball.
Okay. So it's going to be tricky because I would need more context to be clear, but here's my initial hits. Something is going on that one side is going into deadness and the other side is maintaining a sense of aliveness and agency. And I'd be curious about fleshing that out and exploring that to get more information there. And then, depending on what comes up, I would play with you exploring both arms and really getting clear, like what's in you that allows strength on one side and what's inside of you that creates a weakness or a deadness or an immobility on the other, and then flush all that out. And then depending on that, what the information is, any kind of routes to how to move towards transformation could come of that. But right now, I would need to, in my mind, I would want to do a lot more just curiosity and testing and exploring and discovery. I mean, the closest I came to somebody just being dead on one side was due to the fact that I was sitting on that side. And so they were deadening the side that was closest to me. So I just haven't bumped into that, so I'm not sure how to riff on it quite.
Curious.
When you feel inside yourself, I mean, do you get an inspiration on the way that you would physicalize it and explore it?
Maybe I'd slow down and ask that client what side they feel more of an impulse of reaching out from, and then do both arms and see what it's like for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just made me really curious reaching out from the side that feels deadened. Because I thought, well, maybe that's where you want to work with most, or, maybe that's not where the client is most resourced, so I just got really curious about it.
I mean, in the trauma field, whenever you find a resource part of the body, you want to reinforce that, and then you can use that as that kind of pendulation thing. Come into the resource, and swing into the trauma, and come back into the resource. If it wasn't trauma, if it was more of a developmental piece, my guess is that the dead arm is going to be where the access route to the core wound is. When I start to move towards transformation, then bringing in the other arm and seeing if I can grab a resource from one side and bring it to the other. But if I'm in access, deepening, and core material, I mean, with access and deepening, I might play with both arms just to gather information on both sides. But my guess is that when I go for core, it's going to be in the deadened arm.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a different opinion? Is group mind here? Great. All right, what's another example? Something that commonly pops up.
I'm just curious about, is there maybe certain populations or clients that you feel like physicalizing maybe is not a good practice with?
Yes.
Yeah?
I had a client come in for motor vehicle trauma. They were in an accident, and she was panicking in cars. And it was an odd situation because the husband called me up to do the phone intake. And I was like, all right. So I asked him if there was any other trauma that his wife had experienced in the past, and he said no. So she comes in, and her body awareness was the lowest I've ever seen. And it turns out that she escaped from Vietnam, in the whole boat thing, right? And that she'd actually drowned and been resuscitated in the process. Right? And in my mind, I went, your husband doesn't know that? I'm not sure what was going on, but he didn't. That didn't seem like trauma to him. I don't know. So I was working with her to try to get some body awareness so I could start working with the subtle sensations of trauma, working with autonomic nervous system stuff, SE type stuff, and was getting nothing. And I even asked her at one point, I said, well, make a fist. And I said, can you feel that the muscles in your forearm are what contract in order for you to make a fist? And she looked at me, she goes, I don't understand what you're talking about. No. And unfortunately, it was just that one session with her, she didn't come back. But that, I could not have done deep physicalization with her because she needed to do, well, first she just needed a whole bunch of resourcing skills. And then she needed to do a whole lot of body awareness skills. And with where her trauma was, who knows what the body awareness skills would have started to brought up in her. So it would have been months before I could actually do any physicalizing with her. So it does, the less body awareness a client has, the more difficult physicalizing gets. And at a certain point, if the client's willing, the work is about body awareness first, and then you get into these exercises. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have a sense of where you might have gone with her if, I mean, it seems like even body awareness was, you know, would be a significant challenge. Would you maybe have started with like something more like gross motor, just to be into, because I mean clearly she could, you know, mobilize, you know, in a whole way, but not in, you know, having detailed attention. It seems like was where things are kind of breaking apart.
Yeah, finding a way that it would feel safe for her to start to awaken her body again would have been important. And there's stuff that you'll bump into with trauma research and trainings, you know, with brushes and showers and tapping. Like these balls, for instance, with the pokiness of them, if you roll them and just pay attention, it starts to waken up sensation. Depending on where she was at, I might use touch and see if touch work helped wake up her sensations. I mean, even in the massage therapy field, when they're looking at working with trauma, they give a lot of control to the client. So the client's really directing the massage, and they're constantly checking in and having the client give feedback and set pace and boundary so that the client has the felt sense experience that I'm in control of what happens to my body. I can set boundaries around what happens to my body, and my body can be a source of pleasurable stimulation instead of painful stimulation. As far as I know, she didn't have, I mean, I didn't get to know her very well, but I don't know of any sexual abuse in her history. I'm not sure exactly what she saw in Vietnam, if she ran into physical abuses or not. But screening all of that, if it was indicated, I would have used touch. So, but then again, I would have to see, what does the touch do? And is it something that is going to feel good to her? I had another trauma client at just the resourcing initial phase. We would lay down on the floor and he would bring in music, and we would listen to music, and we would just be with what it was like to relax and move out together. Because the way his childhood went with his parents, and the amount of kind of yelling and tension and very rigid structures of how things should be, he never just got to kick back with his high school buddies and listen to music. And so doing that with me became a missing experience that worked the therapeutic alliance, as well as I can actually focus on letting my body relax and enjoy a moment and not have to be hypervigilant about mom kicking down the door and screaming at me and embarrassing me and my friend leaving and never wanting to come back and visit again. It's slow, though. Bill has a story of a client that came in, therapist actually, that came in to see him that wanted to do the embodiment work. And lowest body awareness that Bill had ever bumped into. And so he had the person stand up and put his hand on the inside of his chest and said, I want you to feel your ankles. And can you feel the weight shifting in your ankle as I rock you back and forth? And the client said no. Right? So they were doing more standard talk therapy for the first year, but for 10 to 15 minutes every session, Bill would hold his chest and rock him on his ankles. And it took a year for for this person to wake up his somatic awareness. So it can be very, very, very slow, depending on what the person's been through. Any other questions? We got time for one more. Yes.
I'm wondering with an example like what you just shared and how slow it is, curious what you have to say about how to get folks to come back. Because I imagine that being really frustrating perhaps as a client of it taking so long. And do you do a lot of psychoeducation around, okay, this is why we're doing this for 10 to 15 minutes each session? Or how do you encourage them to stick with it and have them come back each session?
I do two things. One, I try to get a read on what type of presence the person needs from me. And so for some folks that have a lot of fear or shame or something like that, well, let's just look at fear first of all. I'm going to get really grounded and be really slow and really patient and be very clear in my communication that they can just take their time, that there is no right thing to do. And this idea of just being with what is, I might not be as outwardly celebratory as I am with other clients. But I'm going to give this very strong body language, energetic presence message of, I'm with you, it's fine, you don't need to do anything. Because the pressure of feeling like one needs to do something will then compound the fact that they can't do whatever it is they're trying to do, right? So there's an acceptance piece and a patience piece that comes with this. If I'm feeling like there might be a lot of shame in that particular situation, really coming at them with a lot of acceptance. And again, not just verbally, but in my heart. When I was talking about that differentiation piece and grounding and opening the heart, and I said, hey, you need to do this, it's a good idea to do this as a therapist. I mean that literally, that the client that it took me 3 months to be able to look at her, right, I had to stay very, very grounded because she got a lot of pressure in her childhood that she had to be what mommy and daddy wanted. Right? And so she would constantly start to feel pressure from me, so I had to be very clear that she's going to do, that whatever she does is fine. With other clients, some clients have a more analytical or a how do I put it? Engineer types, where their mind likes to know and be able to have maps, right? So for instance, with me, I'm even a 5 on the Enneagram, so I love maps and concepts. And so what I end up doing, and again, I have to calibrate it to where the client's at. I haven't studied Dhyana Fascia, it's next on my list, but one thing that I heard once from her is this idea of giving a client a cognitive framework about what's going to happen, going into the implicit relational experience, and then ending with the cognitive framework so they can leave with something, so that not only they leave with the implicit experience, but they leave with a cognitive framework to hold it in. And so for some clients, I will give them my maps and my game plans and normalize things. Like, yeah, I've seen that before. You know, if I bump into another, I'm a withdrawer, so if I bump into another withdrawer, I'm actually very transparent about it. Right? And it's like, oh yeah, I totally get what you're doing. I'm a withdrawer too, I do it this way. Right? And I've learned how to work with it so it doesn't interfere with my life anymore. And in a way that, for me now, my withdrawal is the canary in the coal mine. When I feel my pull back and my mind start going, I want nothing to do with you, at this point I've linked that to, I'm in a cycle with someone, I need to go meta-communication. Right? So it's no longer a problem in my communication style, it's a clue in my communication style. So I might educate a person about that to give them a sense of hope. Because if there's a hopelessness, then I'm going to hold the hope until they can. But again, a part of it is the feel that you get. What's going to be reassuring to this person that's going to start to create an alliance and trust? Right? Is it reassurance? Is it explaining? Is it patience? Is it acceptance? Is it compassion? Does that answer your question? Okay. So I suppose we should wrap it. But thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to come here tonight.
Thank you.